Here, Leo is the intro as he, yes, kitty, 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 kitty. So we'll start with, I guess, the reading corner. This is where I do a lot of my reading, and just my favorite chair with big bright windows. And then behind is one of my bookshelves. This is a great book if you just really want to know about contemporary literature through the last maybe 100 years or so. It has one story for every year, and it's really great. You get such a range of authors. And one of my favorites, and most people don't know about, is Stranger Things Happen by Kelly Link. She writes a lot of feminist magical realism, and plays with a lot of like fairy tales and sci-fi and stuff like that. I think she's absolutely wonderful, and not enough people know about her. I also love Necessary Grace to Fall by Gina Oshner. Another one of those really great writers that not a lot of people know about. And you can never go wrong with the Master of Short Stories, Chekhov. Here you have some Shakespeare. Will in the World by Stephen Greenblatt is a great primer if you want to know more about Shakespeare, and it's also just a really great for learning about 16th century Elizabethan England, if that's one of your hobby horses. Happens to be mine. I don't have a lot of poetry. In fact, I only own two books of poetry, which I'm hoping to remedy now that I'm done reading for school and I can read for fun. But you can never go wrong with Four Quartets by T.S. Eliot, and then Astonishments by Anna Kamienska, who I think is a Polish poet, and just really stunning. Down here are my writing books. I, as a kind of rule of thumb, don't like a lot of writing craft books. I try to actually not read them. Some of these I read for my program, but not many of them actually. How Fiction Works is one of my favorites. It's by James Wood, and it's really great, even if you're not a writer, for understanding how stories are told. My favorite book on writing is Flannery O'Connor, Mystery and Manners, which I read actually in grad school for theology, and it's one of the first books I ever read that I was reading it and I said out loud, this book was written for me. I just really love it. One of the most helpful books I read in undergrad was actually A History of the English Language, which taught me how our words work and how they came to be, and it really helped me understand how language functions and the story behind it. Down here is just really, really random nonfiction. Let's see, some books on the Middle East and the history there, which I read for my trip when I went to the Middle East in 2009. Mindy Kaling, you can never go wrong with Mindy Kaling. This is a great book if you are in some sort of creative field and want to make a career out of it. It's really practical advice about like getting paid and how to set up a business and practices that'll make it so that you're not a starving artist. I'm mildly obsessed with Peanuts, and so I really have a lot of Peanuts cartoon books. Lit by Mary Karr is a great, amazing biography, or memoir, not biography, a memoir about her struggles with addiction and just all of the things that happened in her life. She's had a crazy life. The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down is a great book about a Hmong family dealing with a child who has seizures that they believe are from God, and then the medical care, trying to get that child medical care in the face of a family that really wants the seizures to continue. The one cookbook I have two cookbooks. I don't use this one very much, but this is one I use all the time because I'm not very good at cooking, though I make great lasagna. I really love this book. It's on decorating. That may not interest you, but I always refer to it because I like pretty rooms, I guess. Bill Bryson, I need to read this, A Short History of Everything. I loaned out my other book by him called Home, which I think is just absolutely amazing. It's about the history of houses, basically. Tina Fey, which is pretty much Bossy Pants, which I think is a should be required reading for any woman between the ages of about 14 and 40. I use this, Martha Stewart's Homekeeping Handbook. I don't use all of it, but it's actually a really great reference book. It's a tome, but I actually really like it. More Peanuts. My grandmother's dressmaking book. I just really love this. And it's like old school, like typed, and my grandmother actually used this book to teach herself how to make dresses, and then did tailoring and sewing to put herself through college. These are my Penguin cloth-bound collection, and below is where I keep things that I need to return, including, let's see, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, which I got from the library, and I read it, and it was pretty good. It was okay. It wasn't my favorite, but it wasn't bad. And yes, I don't know. Anyway, everything on the shelf is theology. It's stuff I read in grad school and in different work that I've done for churches. So I don't think a lot of people are going to be terribly interested in what's on these shelves, but I actually used to have about 4 times the number of books on theology than what you see here. But through a very, very long story, I ended up losing most of the books that I went to grad school and read in grad school, which was very sad. So what is left, are very like kind of near and dear to me for that reason. Okay, and now this is my favorite shelf, and because this is all fiction. I wish I had more, and I'm slowly getting more, but this is what I have so far, and it's all alphabetized by author. I have mixed feelings about how to organize books. I don't think there's one right way or wrong way. So right now we're trying with the standby of organizing by last name of author. We'll see how that goes. So let's go ahead and we'll take a closer look. So up here we'll start with Margaret Atwood. I love The Handmaid's Tale, but anything by Margaret Atwood. I took a class in undergrad that was just Margaret Atwood and Alice Munro, who both Canadian writers and amazing feminist voices. And I just really recommend, if you get a chance to read Margaret Atwood, to do so. To Sir with Love, I actually read in high school. It's a great little novel and has a movie with it that goes with it that's pretty good, actually. Old school, and I think, yeah, it's got Sidney Poitier starring in the movie, and I really love it. Let's see. Cold Sassy Tree by Olive Ann Burns, I read as a kid and didn't understand it, and then reread it as an adult. It's a great novel that's kind of set in the South, and it's like a coming-of-age story of a young boy. It's really good. Italio Calvino, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. If you want to challenge yourself, try him. He's really experimental and interesting. I have 2 romance novels. I went through a huge romance phase in high school, and I have 2 that I've held on to, and this is one of them, which is called The Passions of Chelsea Cain by Barbara Danilinski, and I've just held on to it, and because I sometimes pick it up randomly when I don't want to think too hard. Jennifer Egan, A Visit from the Goon Squad, great stuff. Jeffrey Eugendes, The Marriage Plot, I did not like it. I found it to be boring. Okay, second shelf, the Outlander series, which I mostly keep out because their covers are pretty colors. I really like the first one and have read parts of all of them, but haven't ever finished the whole series. Carol Goodman, The Seduction of Water is one of my favorite novels that I've probably read in the last 8 years or so, since I kind of hit my 20s. I really love it. She's got a lot. She's a literary writer, but it's pretty approachable. This book I absolutely love. I love this book. I read it for my MFA program, and it's one of my favorite books I read, called The Monsters of Templeton by Lauren Groff. Amazing. You can see all of my post-it notes because I wrote a paper on it. And I'll put it back later. Let's see, Tinkers by Paul Harding. Great. Winner of the Pulitzer, so it's not, I mean, of course it's going to be good. It's one of those books you read slowly. And then next to it, probably much to Paul Harding's dismay, if he saw this, would be Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, which you do not read slowly, you read very fast in great gulps, because it's just one of those beach read kind of novels. And lots of Alice Hoffman, because I love Alice Hoffman. She's a lot like this book, except I think this book's better. More literary, smarter. But Alice Hoffman, amazing. Okay, so A Land Without Sin by Paula Huston. Everybody should read this book. It's amazing. I keep saying that about all these books, but she's a great writer, and just everybody should read that book. The History of Love by Nicole Krauss is really good. Wasn't my favorite, but also was really interesting to read. I didn't really get sucked into it as much as I read it from a distance, if that makes sense, but I like her a lot. She's married to Jonathan Safran Foer, who wrote Everything is Illuminated. I just dropped a book. And he's like the famous husband, and she has, and they both are like literary giants, but he's the more famous one. So that's why everybody should go read her, because she's awesome. C.S. Lewis. This is a young adult fantasy novel, Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. I actually have it's the second book in the series, but I went to a reading that she did in where I live last month, and so I bought a copy so she could sign it for me. And then I took the book jacket off because I don't like book jackets. That may be sacrosanct to say, except apparently I kept them on these books. Atonement. Hard. I read it in high school, and in the margins, I wonder if you can find something. You can see, I guess, oh yeah, where I didn't know words, and so I would look them up as I went. Because I was cool in high school. Let's see, and then you have Ella Montgomery, and I have actually probably 3 times. I think I have every book Ella Montgomery's ever written, including all of her random short stories that have been collected and published. But those are in a drawer because I ran out of space. So I just put out Anne and then Blue Castle, because I actually read this more than I go back and read Anne. But Anne was like my childhood friend, so she gets to stay out. Okay, so Distant Hours by Kate Morton. I've tried Kate Morton several times, and I get it. I get why people really love her. I just can't. I'm not really a huge fan. Lolita, one of those books I read for my MFA. I'm glad I read it. I will never read it again. It is disturbing, which is the point. So, good job. Very melancholy, The Russian Dream Book of Color and Flight, but such a great title. And a really amazing, quiet book, and it's by Gina Oshner, who, again, I will push on anybody who will listen to me long enough to hear me talk about her. Went through a massive Jodi Picoult stage in high school, and these are the 2 that I've kept because these are my 2 favorite, but I think I probably had a dozen books by her at one point. Ron Rash this is an amazing book. Serena, Ron Rash, really great example of a main character who you do not like. You never like. There's no attempt to redeem her. She is the villain from day one, but you spend the entire book completely engrossed by her. So this is not, Tumblr won't have read Christian fiction, and I don't suggest it. It's a lot of like Amish romance novels, but these 3 books I actually read in high school, and they are what I would call Christian fiction. Probably the best of what Christian fiction has to offer, which I will not be writing, even though I am a Christian and I write fiction. I do not write Christian fiction, but they're good. They're set during the Roman Empire, and it's about a slave girl, and yeah, they're good. But it's funny because they're right next to Nora Roberts, my other romance novel that I still love. I love that book. I love it more than I should. But I love Nora Roberts' Montana Sky. I actually, let's see, would go through and write like notes, like good double entendre. Again, taking advantage of settings to build and layer themes of story and point of view of characters. Yeah. I don't know why I decided to use Nora Roberts' Montana Sky to start like studying how a writer writes, but that's what I did in high school for fun when I read romance novels. So yeah. Gilead, if you haven't read it, go read it, and then we can talk. Divergent and Insurgent, Veronica Roth. Eventually I'll have to do something on young adult novels, but those are 2 of my favorite. And then of course you have the beginning of Harry Potter. So yay! Okay, so you have the rest of the Harry Potter series. Salman Rushdie, I read that for my MFA, The Satanic Verse. Great stuff. Let's see. The Girl with Glass Feet by Ali Shah is a really amazing work of magical realism that I don't know if a lot of people have heard of. Just really, I mean, the imagery, it just is really gorgeous. The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark, which I think was written, I think she was writing in like the 1960s. And it's a great novel. It's obviously very short, and all of the literary white men authors loved this book. And like when I did research on it for my program, they all just loved that book. She totally like got through the glass ceiling of the literary world in that era, which was pretty amazing. Sigrid Undset, Kristen Lavensdatter, which is actually 3 novels. I had to read this for my program. It's really long. I don't think you should bother with it. But you should bother with is, oh hey, that should actually be with short stories, because that is a collection of short stories. John Maple's The Maple Stories by John Updike. Great stuff. But what you should bother with is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Zafón. Zafón, I cannot say it correctly. It's one of those books, it's for people and about people who love books, kind of obsessively. So, really great stuff. Okay, I think that's it.